So just...
Thank you.
I'm not aware of any. And would the officer like to introduce this, please? I'm good. Okay.
Right.
basically, if
Okay, we've established.
Could you just say something? Hello. That didn't echo then, did it? No. Testing, testing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Testing again, testing again.
Testing 1, 2.
They'll teach me to praise the IT the last couple of play meetings, which has actually worked very seamlessly. And I believe other meetings have worked seamlessly. Yeah, it could be worse. It could be a pack.
Chair, Chair, can I point out a hybrid is an option now? It's not necessary. So as long as there are people in here can hear, that'll be fine. For planning committee, the legislation changed, so we don't have to go online as long as people can hear. I appreciate this transparency, but I thought I'd just give the option.
Yeah, if that option is the last option available to me, we will take that option. But I'm trying to get it so, and I don't want to panic this to go wrong. I just want to give them a couple of minutes. Let's give some time. But I'm being made aware from outside that they can't hear. So, Keith, I've been made aware that it's off again. So, yeah, on the YouTube, yeah.
First, a correction to the committee report. Although it's not indicated in the report, there was a representation made by James Murray MP, raising concerns about the low level of affordable housing at the time and impacts on metropolitan open land. These were seen as more as queries at the time rather than actual objections, and that's why they weren't included in the report. So this application is to redevelop part of the former Kellogg's office site and car park with a mixed-use residential-led scheme of 288 flats across 5 buildings with 6 to 11 stories. And this application follows the approval in 2020 on a site just to the north, shown by the blue line here, for a 5 to 9 story development of 346 flats, again on another part of the former Kellogg's office site. And that included various office, cafe and retail elements and a new pedestrian cycle link to Grove Farm Park and play space. There's some overlap between the current and the approved schemes, with Building 1 being part of the approved scheme, but now also included in this application, but with a lower height and a different number of flats. The application site and the adjoining Grove Farm Park both lie within metropolitan open land. And the land adjoining the site to the west, including a small part of the application site, is also a site of importance for nature conservation, or SINC. This aerial shot of the existing site shows that it contains a large proportion of buildings in hard standing. Over half the site is existing buildings, roads and hard standing. And although it contains some areas of woodland, trees and landscaping, the site as a whole is considered to be previously developed land. It's also worth noting that the site drops in level from Greenford Road towards the park and also enjoins the 10-story atrium point block of flats and previously approved buildings of up to 9 stories to the north. The current scheme would demolish a vacant 3-story office building and provide 288 flats, 426 square meters of commercial floor space, and 166 square meters of community space at ground floor level. It would have 90 car parking spaces and 547 cycle parking spaces. Communal gardens and public realm space are proposed with landscaping and play areas. On balance, this proposal is considered to meet the relevant tests for built development in metropolitan open land, because it would be predominantly on previously developed land, would not cause substantial harm to the openness of the MOL, and would deliver a significant amount of affordable housing within Ealing. It would also provide important benefits to enhance the adjoining Grove Farm Park and the MOL land, including removal from metropolitan open land of over 10,000 square meters of hard standing, provision of some 9,500 square meters of public open space within the site, improved public access to and through the site with a green corridor route for pedestrians and cyclists into Grove Farm Park, and a new green frontage on Greenford Road with small parkland areas created there. The 288 flats will make a substantial contribution to meeting local housing demand. 95 flats would be affordable, some 36% by habitable rooms. And the tenure split would be 30% London affordable rent, 30% London living rent, 26% discounted market rent, and 14% shared ownership, all by habitable rooms. All of the flats would exceed minimum size standards. 67% would be dual aspect, and none of the 34 single aspect units would face north. All the flats would have private balconies to London plan standards. Communal amenity areas would include shared roof garden areas on buildings 5, 7, and 8. That one, and that one. And at ground floor level, there would be 9,500 square meters of communal amenity space, including the linear park, the pocket park, the woodland park, and a residential courtyard. Overall, provision of open space would greatly exceed required standards. The development would not have unacceptable impacts on adjoining residential occupiers in terms of overlooking or outlook due to adequate separation distances between buildings and acute angles between facing windows or balconies. This slide shows the separation distances between the different blocks and mostly they're over 80 meters, whether or not the acute angles between the windows make overlooking unlikely to happen. A daylight sunlight assessment looked at impacts on nearby buildings. It found that some rooms may not meet the BRE guidance target figures, but many of these were bedrooms. It also indicated that this was inevitable due to factors such as nearby tall buildings, balconies overhanging flats, and there being nothing on parts of the site now. So overall, the assessment considered that impacts on daylight to nearby dwellings would not be unacceptable in terms of their living conditions, particularly given that the BRE targets are meant to be applied flexibly, particularly in dense urban environments such as this. The design of the buildings has evolved through extensive negotiations with planning officers. The relocated and lower Block 1 would form a bookend to the row of shops along Greenford Road, creating a gradual increase in height between the shops and Block 5. The two buildings facing Grove Farm Park would take advantage of the drop in levels between the front and rear of the site. So their 9-story heights would sit below the levels of the existing 10+ story atrium point and reduce the visual impact from the park. Since the colours of these buildings in views from Metropolitan land could be sensitive, a condition is applied to require approval of specific colours and materials. So it may not be the colour shown in this image on the right. The arrangement of buildings would define a public route through the site, with a zone of green space linking Greenford Road with Grove Farm Park to the west. And the scheme aims to provide a pedestrianised, focused environment by minimising traffic speeds and maximising the amount of space for planting. Now, this development of 6 to 11 stories can be considered as tall buildings on a site not identified for this in the Ealing Development Plan. However, when considered against London Plan Policy D9 criteria and the Ealing Housing Design Guide on tall buildings, the following factors actually support the proposal. The buildings would adjoin the existing 10-story atrium point and previously approved buildings of up to 9 stories immediately to the north. So they would reinforce an established group of higher buildings and act as a local landmark beside the station and Grove Farm Park. The architectural quality of the buildings is considered to be of a high standard, and they would make a positive contribution to the local townscape. The tops of the buildings are well designed, and it's not considered they would adversely affect local or strategic views. The base of some of the buildings with various commercial and community uses accessible to the public in this area here near Greenford Road would have a direct relationship with the street. The proposed taller building would not harm the setting of any nearby listed building, the nearest one being over 150 meters away. And there's no indication that the building would cause reflected glare, light pollution, or other adverse environmental effects. So overall, I think a reasonable case can be made that these taller buildings are acceptable. In terms of wider visual impact, in most views, the development would be seen alongside existing and emerging buildings, which are higher than much of the existing buildings in the area. For the most part, it will be seen as part of a cohesive group of taller buildings, which form a marker for this new quarter beside the park and Sudbury Hill Station. It will significantly alter some shorter views in the adjoining area, but it's not considered unacceptable in visual terms. And the nearest listed building, as I said, is Sudbury Hill Station, but that's over 150 meters away to the north, and it's not really affected. The slide at the moment shows the existing situation to the left and the proposed with the taller building to the right. A number of objections have been made relating to the loss of trees on the site. And following revisions, most trees would now be retained. 122 trees would be planted or relocated within the site, and 107 trees removed, giving a net gain of 15 trees. The removed trees are of lower quality, and the value of the new planting would be much greater than that of the trees lost, since better quality new trees would replace many existing trees in poor condition. And the new trees will include various species with larger types providing early maturity. In addition, a Section 106 contribution of £100,000 has been agreed for off-site tree planting within a 1 kilometre radius of the development site, or in a park or green space in the borough. And this, together with the developer's planned new and replacement tree planting on the site, is considered adequate mitigation. Because of concerns on impacts on ecology in the site of nature conservation importance, the Council commissioned an independent report from the Surrey Wildlife Trust, and that contained various requirements and recommendations. It did confirm there's no badger sets that are going to be at risk of impacts from the development proposals. And in response to that report, the applicants carried out various ecological surveys and agreed to conditions to secure approval of an ecological management plan, a landscape environment management plan, and a construction environment management plan, which will contain various measures to check for things like badgers before construction work starts on site. In addition, to compensate for the loss of metropolitan land, woodland and habitat, and required improvements to Grove Farm Park, the applicant has agreed Section 106 contributions totaling £402,000 for woodland management, habitat enhancement, meadow creation and planting, outdoor exercise equipment and play area improvements, improvements to park paths, entrances, seats, bins and signage, play area maintenance for approximately 10 years, improvements to the stream habitat, and mitigation offsite for the loss of woodland and badger habitat. These proposals will result in a net biodiversity gain on the site, and overall, the site will become much greener. I think this slide actually shows the existing site to the left and the proposed site to the right. And at the moment, about half the site is buildings, road and hard standing. With the proposal, only 40% will be built development and hard standing, and 60% will be green space. So a big improvement in the green space and biodiversity on the site. Overall, very little impact on the sink. I think only 1% of the total site of nature conservation importance would be affected. Moving on to energy, the proposed development would provide high standards in terms of sustainable design and construction, including air source heat distribution loop, solar panels on the roofs, and a range of energy efficiency measures, along with other renewable technologies. The development would be all electric with no gas on site. This would cut site-wide CO2 emissions by at least 54.5%. Potential impacts with regard to air quality, noise, and land contamination can be adequately dealt with by the conditions proposed. Turning to transport, transport services have assessed potential implications on the highway network and considered it acceptable subject to conditions and financial contributions towards the review and potential extension of existing controlled parking zones, junction improvements, traffic calming, accident remediation measures, footpath improvements, road safety and cycle infrastructure improvements, and other measures. Substantial Section 106 contributions, £218,000, have been agreed for these measures. And with these conditions and planning obligations, including a restriction on resident parking permits, any potential impacts arising from the proposal should be satisfactorily mitigated. 90 car parking spaces are proposed on the site, but below Block 7 and 8 and at ground level. And while 64 spaces were approved on the adjoining site in the past, 100 of the existing spaces would be lost from Atrium Point. And most of the new spaces would be allocated to Atrium Point to replace these. So this means there would be a net increase of only 77 parking spaces across the whole development site, including this site and the one to the north, which has already got permission, and Atrium Point. This would reduce the car parking spaces per flat to only 0.1 space per flat, which is well below normal standards. And at the same time, the Section 106 agreement to deny parking permits in nearby controlled parking zones and funding of a review to extend these parking zones would help reduce parking pressures on nearby streets. To mitigate concerns on the development increasing strains on local community facilities and shops, substantial Section 106 contributions have been agreed for improvement, expansion of local schools and health facilities. But in addition, a very large contribution, or over £500,000, has been agreed towards regeneration of the local area, including business support, local employment creation, capacity building, enhancement of neighbourhood centres, provision of shared affordable workspace, and improved access to public space and greening. So, drawing all this together, overall the scheme will provide a large increase in the housing stock, 95 affordable units, and over £4 million in Section 106 and CIL contributions towards community facilities, transport infrastructure, local area improvements, ecology and open space enhancements in the area. The scheme isn't considered to harm the Metropolitan land or local ecology, and as such, it's recommended for conditional approval subject to Section 106 and Section 278 legal agreements. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Very comprehensive. We have an objector and we have someone speaking on behalf of the applicant. So we'll have the objector. I think we've got it on screen from the objector. And hopefully this goes swimmingly. Keith, are you able to? Right, looks like you are. This is timed at 3 minutes, is it? It is, so we don't need to check on this. Sorry. I should say it's David Harvey who's putting this forward. Oh. Where's the objector? Councillors. I have been contacted to say that the sound's gone again. So can we just check, Keith?
Proposal on behalf of the local residents associations. The whole site has an MOL designation and as such is protected as Greenbelt by way of the National Planning Framework. The GLA Stage 1 reports say that all tests required to build on Greenbelt, i.e. very special circumstances, would need to be satisfied to approve this application. The MPF states the fundamental aim of Greenbelt policy is to prevent urban sprawl, and the essential characteristics of Greenbelt are their openness and their permanence. And what is particularly relevant here, para 134E, to assist in urban regeneration by encouraging the recycling of derelict and other urban land. As you can see from the mock-up, by proposing to cram as many tower blocks as possible onto an MOL site, the proposal fails the openness test and para 149G with no special circumstances whatsoever. The GLA report states that the applicant fails New London Plan Policy D9 for tall buildings and identifies problems with many single aspect flats and lack of pepper potting within the blocks. The applicant admits the various tower blocks would not meet building research establishment guidelines for overshadowing by overshadowing each other and houses on Greenford Road. The rear of the site is part of the Grade 1 sink site of Grove Farm. This picture of the rear of the site shows some of the 82 mature trees they want to chop down and replace with a pitiful increase of 15 new trees. Ealing has a policy to be carbon neutral by 2030 and to absorb the same amount of carbon as just the 3 cedars of Lebanon in the picture, with new trees of 100mm trunk would require between 48 396 new trees alone. No amount of Section 106 money would compensate. Policy G7 of the new London plan states in their development plans, boroughs should protect veteran trees and ancient woodland where they are not already part of a protected site. Ealing has commissioned a damning ecological report that I hope every member has read, and it states, documentation submitted with this application has not appropriately demonstrated that the impacts to the sink is unavoidable and that the needs outweigh the impacts. No evidence has been submitted to demonstrate the proposals will result in measurable gains. As such, the application therefore appears to be in breach of the relevant national and local planning policies. And to top it all, Ealing Rangers have discovered an extensive badger set on site, which would probably be illegally disturbed by building works. On behalf of all residents and badgers, please reject this application.
Right, I think that worked. Keith, would you like to turn the microphone off there, please? I think it went out. It may have been a little bit low at the beginning, but I think it went out to the wider public. I think the committee have heard it twice now. So on behalf of the applicant, Cyril Ogden-Macon, I hope I was close. Right, you have 3 minutes. Just use your mic and we will tell you with 30 seconds to go.
Hello, thank you, Chairman. Good evening, everyone. My name is Cyril Ogden-Macon. I'm the CEO of Interland Group. I'm a fellow of the RICS and I've worked for 32 years in housing and real estate development. We acquired Kellogg Tower in 2015 and developed the first phase of 270 flats, which is now operated by Housing Association Network Homes. Following approval of 4 residential blocks in January 2020, we assembled a specialist team to review how to best maximize the housing opportunity at the previously developed parts of the site, whilst creating one of the greenest estates in Ealing Borough. Despite COVID pandemic, we have worked tirelessly for 18 months on this scheme with huge assistance from the officers of the GLA and Ealing Council. Parkview Place is a landscape-led development that will not only provide much needed 288 residential flats, 36% of these will be affordable housing, and a very significant list of community benefits, which include creating a highly attractive, usable public open space for residents and local community, opening up of the private estate to allow public access from Greenford Road to Grove Farm Park, as well as a pedestrian passage from the junction of Wheaton Avenue West to cross the side to reach the train stations. A community hall with flexible use. This was requested at the public consultations we had 3 years ago. New cafe, new gym, new creche on site. Employment of 1,500 construction jobs and 600 operational jobs. It actually reduces the hard landscaping within the red line by 25% and increases the open recreational area by 10%. We are not just making a contribution of 4 million of Section 106 or sale payment. We're making real positive contribution towards the regeneration of local community and improvement of nearby parks. There's mentions being made of the sink area. This constitutes less than 5% of the overall site. And actually what we have there right now is a redundant office auditorium, car parking spaces, which have been developed, and majority of the site will remain green, which were previously undeveloped, and only developed part of the site is being built on. We have met David Harvey, the speaker who objected, and his colleagues at one of our consultations last year.
30 seconds.
And he believes no further housing should be built in his ward at all. To conclude, we will commence works within a year of the approval of this scheme. We urge you to please approve the application for the much needed housing to commence regeneration of this area of Greenford and contribute significantly towards the upliftment of Grove Farm Park through numerous schemes we've agreed with the Parks Department. Thank you.
Thank you. Well timed, I must say. Okay, right. I will give the officer the right to respond to either the objector or the applicant to put anything right as far as he's concerned to the record or whatever, and then I'll open it up for questions. Okay.
Right. I think there were 6 points in I should deal with with what the objector said. First of all, metropolitan open land. I think the objector is misunderstanding government guidance on metropolitan open land in green belts. This scheme does not need to show very special circumstances. It's specifically allowed by an exception clause in the National Planning Policy Framework 134G, which allows for development in metropolitan open land where it's previously developed land, doesn't substantially harm the openness of the land, and provides a significant amount of affordable housing to the local area. And the scheme does all three of these. So it totally meets these criteria. And that's a point agreed by the GLA. We're happy with the development of metropolitan land, provided it's policy compliant in affordable housing terms, which it is now. So I think that point's dealt with. There was a point about the scheme having a large number of single aspect units of flats, when in fact it doesn't. It only has, it's a 67% or 2/3 of the flats are dual aspect. So it's only a third which are single aspect. None of these face north. That's quite a low proportion compared with many of the schemes we deal with. So in that way, the scheme is actually quite good. Let's see, in terms of loss of trees, the site contains over 300 trees at the moment. Most of these are being retained. There's 107 trees being removed, and that's compensated for by 66 new trees being planted and 56 trees being relocated within the site. So there's a net gain of 15 trees, which is 5%, which it doesn't seem an unreasonable amount. It's actually a gain of trees. All of the trees being removed are lower quality trees. There's no good quality trees being removed. And they've been replaced with new or better quality trees, which may survive better or last longer than the trees they replaced. The tree officer has looked at the trees situation, and they use a measure called the CAVAT value, which is capital asset value of amenity trees, which measures the size of the tree, its health, and its amenity value. And they've assessed that the value of the trees being relocated or planted greatly exceeds the losses by a substantial amount. So they're very happy with it. They have mentioned that the cedar trees, they were actually too large to be relocated, otherwise they would have been kept. But they are not in great condition either. They're not high quality trees. So they would be replaced by other trees. And overall, the picture is actually to improve the tree cover on the site. And when that's added to the £100,000 for tree planting off-site, I think it more than compensates for any tree loss. So that was that point. In terms of the damming report by the Surrey Wildlife Trust, well, I'm not really sure it was damming. We commissioned it, and it came up with a number of requirements and conditions that the applicant had to meet, like showing a net biodiversity gain, showing evidence of why land had to be lost for various things, and the measures they're going to take to deal with mitigation. In fact, the applicants have done all these things. So I think the objector's comments are actually out of date. He doesn't seem to have read the response by the applicant. They have provided all the measures Surrey Wildlife Trust asked for. We ran their response past Surrey Wildlife Trust, and they've accepted all of the points in it, as long as we made conditions for various enhancement and ecological plans. They accept there's a biodiversity gain on the site. They accept there is no impact on the badgers, and that would also be aided by the construction ecology management plan, which will check the site before construction works to make sure there are no active badger sets again. And there's also this £10,000 contribution to the Badger Trust to help with mitigation measures for badgers elsewhere. So for all these reasons, I'm not sure the objectives points are really valid in terms of ecology. On the point about overshadowing of other buildings, I've read the design and access statement. I've had extensive consultations with the applicant's consultants to go through it with them. And I think we're satisfied that it does meet the BRE guidance. There may be feelings with the BRE guidance, but that's the only guidance we have. And it certainly seems to meet that. So I'm not sure that point's valid either. Lastly, on the tall buildings and whether they comply with London Plan Policy D9, well, I'm not sure they do feel that. The GLA certainly didn't say that these buildings would fail the criteria of Policy D9. They just said it's up to the council to assess them against it, which we've done. And we think it makes a reasonable case that they do comply with these criteria. So I think that's all the points that were raised.
Okay, Councillor. Sorry, thank you, John. I see a sea of hands. I saw Councillor Summers quite early, and I'm going to take left to right. And for those who haven't been on a committee with me, we're going to split this up into questions, and I'm hoping you can get your questions out once, a set of questions each, and we'll deal with all the questions, and the officer or whoever needs to deal with the questions, we'll deal with them, and then we'll move into the debate. So we're not back and forward with questions. So Councillor Summers, and after that, can you all put your hands up who wants to speak? Okay. Yeah, it doesn't mean you can't. If you don't put your hand up now, it doesn't mean you won't get a question, but I don't want to keep bringing people back all the time. Okay, right. Councillor Summers, go ahead.
Yeah, my questions are both about cars. You mentioned that the site was all electric, in other words, no gas heating. Does that apply to the car park? I mean, considering when this development is finalised, we'll probably not be able to produce petrol or diesel engines. Hopefully all the car parking places should have electrical vehicle charging points, or if they haven't, can that be made a condition? The second one is about the traffic congestion. There's horrendous congestion along that road. I'm interested to know what exactly the Section 106 money is going to do to ameliorate that. I think there's about 600 vehicle movements, generated by this site daily. For example, will there be a ban on right-hand turns coming out onto Greenford Road?
Hold there. I'm going to take them. Batch of 3, I think. You've made a note of that. Take it, John. Yes. Right. Councillor Brett.
Great, thanks. You mentioned about the daylight, and you did say that indicate in the report that actually with some of the properties it didn't quite meet the requirements. I'm kind of curious to know, because you said it's mainly bedrooms. Do we have a percentage of a breakdown of bedrooms versus living space? That's kind of one part of the question. And the other part is, are the properties that are the most affected by lack of light, are they in the affordable or are they in the private rented market? Thank you.
Councillor Dabrowska.
Thank you. I've got a few questions for clarification. The applicant mentioned there's a £4 million Section 106 contribution, but the report says just under 3. So just clarification on the disparity of what was said, unless I misunderstood. With regards to the justification, the planning officer mentioned justification on building on MRO land, and that it doesn't require special circumstances. However, I didn't grasp, and I didn't grasp from the report, the justification on building on sink land as a different classification, because that requires special circumstances mitigation. So I would like that to be clarified. And I would like clarification. The planning officer at the beginning, about twice said, that it's previously developed land. However, as we can see from this application, that the development will encroach on new land. So which sort of part of the additional MRO land encroachment was previously developed? Because this proposal is building on new land, which wasn't previously developed. So I just need clarification, because what the officer said didn't ring true for me. So I'd like to have that justified.
I don't think you mean true. I think you mean you just didn't understand. Okay, all right. Okay. Can we take, John, can we take those? There is another round of questions at least to come, but if you can take those, address those, that would be helpful.
Maybe you can work backwards. In terms of previously developed land, the government definition of previously developed land is a site containing a building or a structure and the curtilage of that building, whether or not includes land that's been developed or whether it's open land already. So the whole site is considered as previously developed land, even though parts of it may well be green space or covered in trees. The fact that it's got buildings on it, on large parts of it, classifies it as previously developed land. So this development will mainly be beyond hard standing and existing buildings, but parts of it will be on land, which is green space at the moment. That doesn't stop it being development and previously developed land in terms of the government definition. So that was that point. Yes, on the justification for building a metropolitan development land, well, I think what I said was that government guidance says there's, as an exception, you can build on metropolitan land where it's previously developed land. There's no substantial harm to the openness of the land, and it provides a significant amount of affordable housing to meet local needs. So in that, because it meets these criteria, it doesn't need to show very special circumstances like some developments might have. There's not really similar policy guidance for sinks. Obviously, you're meant to justify any development in a site of nature conservation importance. And there's various criteria you've got to go through. You have to show that development's necessary and there's no alternative to it. But if you can't, you should try and mitigate it. So the applicant has, these were points which are actually raised by the Surrey Wildlife Trust. They asked the applicant to do these things. They did submit a document which justified why the scheme needed to be in these parts of the site, and then all the mitigation measures they're proposing. So we think they actually meet what the guidance tells you to do on that. So that's probably as much as I can say on it. On the point of the Section 106 agreement, the Section 106 contributions total just over 3 million, and there's another million in CIL contributions, which total 4 million altogether. So the combined Section 106 and CIL is just over £4 million. Just going to the electric vehicle charging. Well, there is a condition applied so that I think it's 20% of the parking spaces will have active electric charging and the rest will have passive charging. So they will be converted to active as demand arises from them. So that condition is already there. In terms of traffic measures being proposed, I think all I can tell you is that we got a series of requirements from our transport officer, which included things like traffic calming measures, junction improvements, footpath improvements, cycle infrastructure. They don't go into detail at the stage exactly what these measures will be or which junctions will they affect. I mean, that'd be something that we sorted out later. So that's as much information as we have. We know the range of measures and we know they're on local roads. We don't know specifically what each junction measure is going to be, I'm afraid. I think the last point was about the daylight. We do have a quite extensive daylight sunlight assessment, which lists every property affected in terms of daylight and the windows affected. That's quite a few hundred dwellings. So I couldn't actually tell you offhand what percentage of the rooms most affected were, whether they were bedrooms, living rooms, or bathrooms. That's something we'd have to go through in some detail. It would take some time to do. Similarly, I'm not sure exactly what tenure of buildings would be most affected in terms of daylight. That information is all in the daylight sunlight assessment, except we'd have to go through several hundred rooms to actually work that out. So I can't really answer that question right at the moment. We can look into it. I think that was all the questions.
Yeah, I think that's all the questions that I've noted down. Right, the next three are Councillor Conti, Councillor Woodruff and Councillor Mahmood. So Councillor Conti.
Thank you. My question is just about the area of woodland at the back of the site, just in terms of the depth, so the number of meters from where the fence is now. How far into that are we talking about in terms of the development extending? I couldn't quite. Is it all of that wooded area? Is that all going to go? Is that where the 100-odd trees are all going to be removed from, or is it just part of that area? Because I didn't think it was. I couldn't particularly tell from the plan, from the report, exactly how far that goes in. The other thing, I guess there is a difference between. I know there's obviously a large number of trees being planted. There is a difference between a wooded area and then landscaped sort of parkland where there are trees being, being replanted or, young trees. My second question was just on the controlled parking zone. I think you mentioned that there was going to be effort or an attempt to extend the operation of the CPZ at the moment, because there's only 0.1 parking spaces per unit in this development. I think that's what was mentioned. And clearly during at the moment, I think it's 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the afternoon around that area. What is the attempt to extend that? Because most people are working during the day. If the CPZ is only operational in working hours Monday to Friday, that doesn't necessarily stop people having a car, parking there in the evenings and over the weekend. So I was just wondering what the plans are in terms of extending that to stop people having a flat, not having a parking space and just parking on streets nearby.
Okay, Councillor Woodruff.
Thank you. Just first of all, I am a Green for Green councillor, and I think I wouldn't have responded particularly to the consultation because I think for most of it, it didn't seem to have any detrimental effect on Green for Green. So with the exception of the traffic, which I think Councillor Summers has already raised, and I think that certainly disturbs lots of people. That particular part of Greenford Road is horrendous traffic, but you've just responded to that. The other point, Councillor Conti has also stolen quite a lot of my thunder as well. When we went on the site visit, we've had a look down. There seemed to be a stream at the bottom. I don't know whether it was, but I don't know whether they're going to build over that. I wasn't quite sure how far the construction site went. But it did look some rather nice ancient woodland type area, which it would be a shame to lose. And I think we should sort of try and protect those good bits about the badges as well. It seems quite a good part of nature. So I think I would want to know exactly how. Yeah, I wanted to know exactly how much of that was going to disappear, or where couldn't we have persuaded the developer to move it and not affect that? Because I mean, there's quite a lot of space around, and whether we had a sort of discussion of trying to prevent losing any of that at all.
Councillor Mahmood.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of clarification. One is my concern is the same like Councillor Summers and Councillor Woodruff mentioned that in terms of traffic calming situation. As you know that we have introduced recently the bus lane there, which is 7 to 7 Monday to the whole week, including Sunday. That could cause a long queue like Councillor Summers have from Greenford to John Line roundabout. And people are waiting hours and hours on that. So I just wanted to know what the transport department, highway department is thinking to mitigate that effect. One. Second is you mentioned the cycle infrastructure there. The cycle infrastructure we introduced 2 years ago. So there is a cycle infrastructure available there for both sides of the Greenford Road. But I just wanted to know what is the future progression on that. And third, in terms of the entrance, this side has got only one entrance and one way to come and one way to go. Would that be remain as it is, or there is some changes in terms of entering in the side?
Right. Okay, John. Address those.
Rightio. Just working backwards again. There is one site entrance at the moment. There's now going to be 2 site entrances. The existing site entrance has been relocated further south on Greenford Road, and the new entrance will be framed by buildings between buildings 1 and 5, mainly a pedestrian cycle entrance leading into the park. So there will be 2 entrances now instead of 1. In terms of traffic calming measures, I think it was the same kind of answer I gave before. We get comments from the transport officer of the measures they think are necessary and what the funding should be for them. They use that funding to work out what these measures are. They don't, at this stage, necessarily give us the details of what the measures will be. So and that applies the same equally to the cycling infrastructure. So all I know is there's funding for them, and that will be reviewed and looked at to see what works best. But I don't know specifically at this stage what these measures are. Going on to the woodland at the rear of the site. Sorry. Yes, on the woodland at the back of the site, buildings B7 and B8 do encroach into that woodland a bit. Not very much. I think you can. We haven't actually got the plan in front of us now, but you can see there's quite a lot of woodland actually left in between the stream and buildings B7 and B8. Most of the works to the woodland are for bank consolidation to support the buildings. It's a relatively small part of the site of nature conservation importance being lost. It's less than 1% overall. So it's relatively small, and that certainly that bank of trees and woodland is going to be largely retained there. The point about extending the controlled parking zone and what ours, well, part of the Section 106 funding is to review the existing controlled parking zones and decide what needs to be done for the future and whether these need to be extended or new ones added. I suppose at that stage, they would also consider what hours of parking restrictions would work best. So we don't know the answer at the moment, but that's what the Section 106 funding is to work out. So that's, again, as much as I can say on that at the moment. I think I partly answered the question about the land coming up to the stream. Not very much of that land, as I was saying, is going to be lost. We did, and both the Surrey Wildlife Trust and ourselves asked the applicant to demonstrate why there were no alternative options that would involve encroaching less into that land. And they provided quite a convincing reasons why that is, mainly to do with the separation of the buildings and how the angles they have to be at each other, and ability to get roads in and access for emergency vehicles and so on. And once you've done all these things, there's very few options left that didn't involve some encroachment into that side of the site. So they have provided quite a convincing justification why there wasn't an alternative. And so in that situation, all we can do is seek mitigation and minimize the harm to it, which I think they've done.
Can I just,
Sorry.
I was just going to ask John, just for clarity, to confirm the access points into the site because of the overlap of the previous scheme as well. So can we just dwell on that? Because I think there is a plan obviously in the committee report which shows the site entrance into the site, which is one access for vehicles.
Yes.
I think you said two, so I just wanted to clarify those.
One's primarily for vehicles, one's for pedestrians and cycles. That's my understanding of it.
So I've just got a couple of questions. So one of them is about the affordable units and where they are within the scheme, and what was the reasoning behind their location within the scheme. That's question one. The second one was about the replacement trees, and you did talk quite a bit about it, but actually I didn't get it all down. So I'd quite like you to go over what you were saying about why the new trees were better, and whether or not that addresses the objector's point about carbon capture. And then just a couple more. So I've heard of a green roof, but I haven't actually heard of a blue roof or indeed a brown roof. So I just wondered if you explain what they are. And just finally to confirm that badgers are not affected by the development, as that was also brought into question by the objector.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, 4 questions there.
So in terms of the badgers, as I said, we commissioned an independent report from Surrey Wildlife Trust. They did a survey of the site and they confirmed there is an old badger set on the site, but it's not active anymore. And their conclusion was that the development will have no impact on any badgers or badger sets. There are other badgers, but not that near the development. So they were quite happy with the measures which have been put in place, which include this construction environment management plan, which will require another check by the applicant before any construction work starts, that there are no badgers moved into these sets again, and any measures will have to, and with an ecologist on site to check that. So with that, and of course there's the contribution to the Badgers Trust as well. So with all these measures, it looks like the badgers are fairly well looked after. You're asking about blue roof. My understanding of blue roof is one that captures rain and uses the water to harvest it and use it for planting and for plants and various other uses within the site. Well, replacement trees, yes. So yeah, so they're proposing to remove 107 trees. These are all class B and C trees, so there's no good quality trees among them. They're all the lower quality trees that are being moved. And they're being replaced by, well, there's 66 new trees planted and 56 trees being relocated. So, and with a net gain of 15. But of course, with 66 new trees, you should get better quality because you're going to get a new tree in which is healthy and good condition and they're going to use some fairly mature trees with a wider variety of species. I think a lot of the trees on the site are self-seeded. You're going to get much more variety of trees, probably better specimens. And I think I preferred before to the tree officer's comments about the caveat value of trees, which measures their height, size, health, and amenity value. And they work out a value for each tree being removed and the value of always being replaced or a new planting. And they worked out that the new planting is substantially greater than the amount of the value of the trees being lost. And so comparing that with the extra 100,000 for off-site tree planting elsewhere in the borough, it seemed that the trees would be more than compensated for, and you hopefully would end up with better quality trees on the site. So that was that. Yeah, for the affordable housing units. I think my understanding is most of the affordable housing units are in blocks 1 and 5. And I think that applicant explained that that was mainly for a question of management, to make the management of the affordable units easier, particularly when you get a registered housing provider wanting to manage them. I don't think they necessarily want them spread up and spread across a number of different dwellings with small amounts in each. So that's it. So these are the blocks 1 and 5 are the two nearest the road, but also very near the Pocket Park and the Woodland Park, and beside the small shops, cafes, and community areas.
They still have access to the main amenities. Yeah.
Oh yes, yes.
So Rouse, you wanted to come back on one of your answers, and I think Councillor Brett wants to come back on one of her answers.
Yes,
so,
please.
But we do need to move to the debate, but we'll allow that. So let's take both of these.
Thank you.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify on the response with regards to the sink mitigation. I'm just reading the London plan with regards to, for example, the ODPC, but the same principle applies about sinks where development that negatively impacts on a sink may only be permitted in exceptional circumstances where mitigation can be proven, and then it goes on to the grading, and in this case is the grade 1 borough importance. I still haven't seen the justification in the report of this mitigation and justification of building in exceptional circumstances for the sink aspect. I
do think the officer did answer it, but I'm obviously going to let him come back again, but I do think he did answer it the first time round. But I think he made reference to the sink. But anyway, Councillor Brett.
Thank you. You've just answered Councillor Martin's question about where the affordable housing. So you know that there is going to, it mainly will be in block 1 and 5. So do we know, or do you have the answer to which blocks are suffering the most from the lack of light? Because then that would give us a bit better indication and would kind of answer my question. Because we are asking people to live in these houses.
Question.
Flats.
Right. Well, I think it's probably the same answer I gave before. I'm sure that information is there. I don't know which specific affordable units whether the affordable units would suffer more from light impacts than the other units. Blocks 1 and 5 contain other units as well as affordable units. Again, we'd have to go through the daylight sunlight assessment in some detail to work that out. I can't really give a clear answer on that in the moment.
Alex?
Yeah, I was just going to come in on that. I think from my understanding, I think where there are transgressions in terms of the sunlight and daylight, it's on the blocks which are cranked, the blocks which are positioned to the back of the site because of their footprints. So obviously you can imagine where they turn, there might be some compromises within those blocks. So that wouldn't be the blocks, obviously 1 and 5 to the front because they're more traditional shapes.
Councillor Dabrowski's sink MOL.
Yeah. Right. Well, I think, as I mentioned before, we did ask the applicant to justify why they needed to encroach into the sink, and they gave us a reasonable explanation of that. I think the circumstances are that it's providing quite a lot of affordable housing on the site, and the only way to fit this amount of development into it is with a specific design that doesn't impact on the quality of living of the different units. It just fits into the site in a certain way, and that they looked at different options, different layouts, and they didn't find one that avoided going into the site of nature conservation importance at all. I think you could make an argument for these various things that it is justified, but particularly with the amount of mitigation that's being proposed, with all the new tree planting, with the very substantial amounts of Section 106 contributions to improve the woodlands and planting and increased biodiversity gain in this area, I think that provides a reasonable justification for the quite small encroachment into the site of nature conservation area, which is only 1% of its area. That's probably as much as I can say on that.
Right, I'd like to move into the debate now. So I will take any contributions on the debate. Should people wish to put their hands up? I saw Councillor Summers again, sorry, he happens to sit right in front of me, so he will be the first person to draw my eye, but Councillor Conti's second.
I'll be very brief though, you'll be glad to hear. Yeah, I think on balance, I'm in favour of the scheme. I think the affordable housing offer is okay. It's not, brilliant. We always want much more housing, but it's acceptable. And there are improvements. There are things which will benefit the community. For example, the access all the way through to the park. And also, I think the applicant mentioned that path can be used to help people on Winton Avenue to sort of shortcut through to the station. My main issue is still the traffic. And I don't understand why, well, the officer came back and said, the detail of traffic calming can't be said at this point, but I know with the plough site, the former plough in Northolt, which is on a very similarly very, very busy road, which is now a sort of mini Sainsbury's. We did add a condition that there could be no right-hand turn out of that site. So it could be done on this site and would help significantly, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Summers. Councillor Conti.
Thank you. I still have some concerns about the extent of the tree removal. I know that you said that it's only 1% of the total area of the site encroaches onto the wooded area, but there's still 100 trees, approximately 100 trees that are there currently that are being removed or replanted or repositioned. And I know in the tree report, it does talk about a densely planted avenue of trees, which is going to be removed. And as I was saying earlier, that's replanting, very young, small trees. It's very different to trees that have been there for decades, and it's going to take a very long time. You're talking years and years and years for that benefit.
Sorry, there's a bit of feedback. Do you want to just take your mic away, please? Is that okay?
Oh, my phone, that's probably why.
Sorry to interrupt you.
That's all right. I think it's going to take a very long time for for that to be mitigated by planting some new trees. We're talking a long time into the future. And I think that, green and wooded areas are areas where, they are few and far between. We should be preserving them. In this sort of starting to encroach further into that metropolitan open land, I think, makes me really concerned about this development.
Anyone else indicating? Councillor Mahmood.
Yeah, Chair, I'm just wondering, I know that there's a difficult decision in terms of the woodlands and removing trees and the traffic calming measure as well. But overall, I think that development will, in terms of affordable housing, in terms of the lock land at the back will open, and that will be the access from the Witten Avenue West directly to the station. That could be the overall beneficial for the broader community, and the community designated community space within that development will be available for the local community. Yes, I know, but there is a substantial then harm. So I would be intent to support that application.
Okay, Councillor Martin.
I suppose similar to my colleagues, there are elements of the scheme that are not perfect. And I mean, I'm assuming that the trees are not little twigs that are being replaced, that we've actually got some more mature trees that we're putting in instead. And therefore that would mitigate some of those factors. And I'm concerned about the traffic and the impact, potential impact on Metropolitan overland, but nevertheless on balance, I think, you know, it's a good scheme. It's got some very attractive features and obviously affordable housing. And so on that basis, I'll be supporting it.
Councillor Dabrowska, then Councillor Woodruff.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the back of Councillor Martin's actually comments about the trees, where the planning officer nodded in order to sort of accept the fact to plant mature trees in place. Mature is quite a wide concept. Is mature 10 years, 20 years, 50 years? Obviously, the more mature, the more expensive a tree is, and more.
It's not always years that make you mature, though, is it?
We're all mature, not. So it'll be interesting to put that into a condition format in what we accept as planting. You know, what Councillor Conti said is, if you plant it, and what Councillor Martin said, you know, plant a few twigs, and it'll take 20 years before proper maturity for it to be valuable to the environment. So I'm not an expert on trees, but it'll be good to put that in a condition for the applicant. Either we or the applicant plants a significant type of quality of tree. So I would like to put that in a condition. I'm not sure how to word it, but Alex may recommend to make it, the quality of trees have to be there, not the twigs. And in terms of, I mean, my level of questioning in terms of the sink, I have to say I am not convinced by the level of mitigation for the sink purposes. And my first question was about the developed land. Now, and the officer said about, oh well, it's in the sort of the curtilage of the site. Now, a site, a red line on the map, is just a legal entity, for example, and that's just a man-made administrative line rather than an area of natural environment. So I'm not convinced, and I have to say I'm not convinced by the justification to build on that aspect. And the 1%, just to clarify, the 1%, is it 1% of this site is MOL sink or MOL, or is it 1% of the MOL is being built on?
You can come back. I'm just going to say that questions were before, debate is now. You proposed a condition. I'll come back on the condition first, I think. And in terms of, I'm not entirely sure what your condition was. It's about numbers of mature trees, and by your very start, your definition of maturity is difficult to have, really. So the officer indicated that some of the trees were going to be mature. It's just, I think what your point is that we actually capture that is, you know, it's not just words, we capture it in a condition. Yeah, understood. A, can we do that? And B, what is the level of maturity of trees that we are looking at replacing, or sorry, renewing, should I say?
Right. I think maybe to some extent that has already been dealt with within the application. The tree officer had quite lengthy discussions with the applicant about the trees. And I think I mentioned before this caveat value, which is a measure of the value of the trees lost and the value of the trees gained. And that value takes into account size of the trees, health, and so on. So, and the caveat value of the proposed trees is much greater than those lost. So maybe there's some way of capturing that. Because I guess there's not a condition that says that at the moment, but that's what they've offered. They've offered a caveat value.
Firstly, I would like to say, are you satisfied with the officer's answer on that? And that it is captured within the report and captured within the application, etc. Or would you need to firm that up? Because firstly, I'm satisfied with the answer. The trees are going to be better overall, and that's what our tree officer, who is the expert on trees, and I'm not, has looked at it and has added saying that we are getting better trees, more mature trees back. I see your hand, Councillor Conti. I will come to you.
I was just going to say, I think we've got conditions that are already designed to capture that in any sense, in any case. So I can't think of any additional wording that would be required. The conditions are set out in the report, and they do obviously seek details of tree planting, which would naturally secure the specimen size as well.
Conti.
My only question on that was when you this value, when you work out that something's better or worse, is that what's going to, let's say you replace tree A with tree B, are you measuring the value of that tree B, what it's going to be when it's fully grown? So like I said, that could be in 10 years time. Or are you saying that that's the additional value you're going to get from that tree as soon as it's planted? Because that's two very different things to say that, yes, this is going to be a better quality tree when it's fully grown in 15 years time than saying it's a better quality tree now. That was just, that's just, because I'm not sure how these values are derived, but you know, I think that's an important difference though.
John, I realise you're a planning officer, not a tree officer. So you'll have to get the answer you get. So can I take Councillor Summers before you come in, John?
I just want to do, as we're talking about conditions, like to formally propose a ban on right-hand turn vehicles exiting the site. I don't know, obviously the Highways Department might have a view on that, but I mean, we have done it at other sites and it would seem to help at this site.
Just on that, I mean, obviously that hasn't been recommended as far as I'm aware in the discussions and feedback so far. However, we can take that back to them. As John has mentioned, obviously the precise mitigation measures that will be secured will obviously need to be worked out, you know, fully engineered solutions, but we'll take that back to them. I think note that in the minutes, etc.
Can you give that one to me to make sure that it is? I don't want to say, as similarly as we're not tree off, you know, experts, we're not traffic experts. We have our own views and what have you. But let me take that or monitor that it is being done from this tonight. Should we pass this application? Through the chair, a minute. Councillor Woodruff has been sitting here very patiently waiting to speak and has been hijacked by girth of trees, but
I don't have a great deal to say other than I think if you're going to ban a right turn, then you have to work out some way of going left and then coming up to roundabout and coming back, and knowing that bit of road, I think that's unlikely, but let's leave it to the traffic engineers to work out. I mean, my overall things, I'm still, some of my colleagues have, I agree with, I'm still unhappy about the ancient woodland bit. I think developers could have done a bit more to safeguard that, but compared with the overall thing, I think most of it is actually quite well worked out, and I think it would be difficult to sort of turn the whole thing down on the basis of that. I suspect an appeal we'd be roasted in an appeal, but I just want to I'll register my unhappiness about it, but I don't think it's going to stop the development.
Okay, I see no more. Is anyone in the waiting? I mean, we had a bit of a ding dong there. Does anyone waiting for any response from the officer at all? No, so I'm ready to go to the vote if everyone else is.
Can I just suggest something with you, through you, Chair? There's a lot of growing concern in the residents in this chamber as well in terms of traffic major. I'm not suggesting any condition or anything like that. No, right. What I'm suggesting to one of the recommendation, if you could consider that about the bus lane, because that is really cause a main trouble. And I'm sure the local councillor sitting here will be agreed on that. And so that's my suggestion to reconsider the bus lane. They said that the shortest bus lane in the country is only 1.5 meter bus lane, but it causes a long tail. So that's, I wanted to put on the record to reconsider the bus lane. So that could be resolved lots of traffic problem. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Ahmed.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just adding the same thing, Councillor Mahmood's comments, because this road actually kind of gateway from two boroughs, Brent and Harrow, and there's a heavy traffic coming from all the way around from Norfolk Park Hospital and from the Brent and leading to the A40. And this is since, I mean, my two colleagues also echoed the, mentioned that the same issue. I don't understand. I have lived right across there for a long time, the development, this Kellogg's, and I can see while there was just simple offices there, there was a big issue for right turning, and we had to keep clear box. Still, it was lots of issues there. So I'm not sure how this is going to be addressed. And as Councillor Mahmood said, the bus lane is actually bringing the more trouble than before the traffic point of view. And even if we have a not right turn and have only left turn, and then I don't know, the nearest roundabout will be the 1 mile almost, and that'll be the borough of Harrow. So although it's a good scheme, but the traffic is going to be a big issue. Thank you.
Okay, similarly to the right turn, the bus lane, we can, I mean, I don't want to pick specific things that the committee are saying to do, but I'm saying that the traffic officer will, obviously with all the remediation for this scheme, we'll feed that back to them and we'll put that into the mix. And I hear what you're saying and I hear what's been said. So as long as we feed that back to the traffic officers when they're using, working out a scheme using the Section 106 money, should this application be approved, then yeah, I think that's enough on that for now. So I'm just ready to go to, sorry, did everyone understand what I just said? You're looking critical at the back there. Yeah, I know, yeah, okay. Right, okay, so I'm going to go to the vote. All those in favour of the application, please show. Got it, Kate. 1, 2, 3. Yes. Okay, all those against? 2. Therefore, there's no abstentions? No, right. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you to the members of the public and for putting up with the IT issues. It's been a bit longer than I thought it was going to be, but I think we got there in the end. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Thank you, John.